two, one, go.
Hey guys, Pat Miletich back again with another episode of Super Soil, Superhuman, and we've got a really good show today. I tell you what, the stuff that some of you, I'm sure, are observing in our skies, and a lot of other things that are going on in the world today. Our guest today is an expert in. He did a documentary, an incredible documentary, giving a lot of historical references to the buildup, at least a century of experiments and things that have gone into what we currently see today in 2024. Matt Landman is going to be our guest today, and he is the producer and creator of Frankenskies, and you can also go to frankenskies.com to watch that incredible documentary. Matt, thank you for joining me today.
A pleasure to be on the show. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and Matt was very nice and helped me get on some very big shows. So we're going to make sure to spread the word and get Matt out there because his expertise and knowledge is something that the world needs today. And so, Matt, I'll just say this. Excuse me. Somebody very close to me. I was down out in Ohio, Kentucky region, right on that border area for the NCAA rowing championships. And my middle daughter, who's only 20 years old, looked up into the sky and she said, "Oh my God, this is incredible. This is ridiculous. I can't believe that nobody's even noticing." And I looked up, of course, and saw the sky was just a checkerboard of chemtrails. And another person in our family looked up and said, "You guys are crazy. What are you talking about?" And so that's kind of within families, people don't understand what's going on. So you kind of want to give a little bit of a historical reference for people to educate themselves on how this all started and where we are today.
Well, yeah, and it is like that in friend circles, and in the workplace, in family units. You'll have people on completely opposite sides of the fence. For me, I grew up, I never knew about it. I never at all thought that it could even be a possibility. And I thought I knew so much. I knew about, 9/11 truth. I grew up in the DC area and I was living there and had a girlfriend in New York when all that happened. And it didn't take me long to realize what was happening with all that. But with geoengineering or chemtrails or whatever word you want to give it, the terminology can scare people away. For my journey, I ended up working on a farm. I've done all sorts of different walks of life. And in one of my chapters of being, I worked on a farm in Northern California where I firsthand witnessed weather modification. I lived in a very rural area where there wasn't very much air traffic at all, sparse. Like you'd see maybe one or two planes fly over this farm that I worked on a daily basis. And on the edge of this massive storm front where we were expecting 1 week of rain, a dozen planes showed up. So there you already have a statistical anomaly, an irregular pattern of appearance. A lot of planes are showing up out of the blue where there weren't any, an hour before, or day before, a week before, same time of day, the next day or week or month, and there's not those planes in the sky. So there's that irregular pattern of appearance, which is something for people to look up and wake up and notice. But these planes zigzagged in front of the storm front and left these persistent linear cirrus cloud formations, these lines out of the back of the jet. So not only was there the irregular pattern of appearance, but also these planes were leaving lines out of the back where usually planes do not. And then the storm rolled over and didn't leave any rain. None of the rain fell out of the clouds. And then I've slowly learned from a friend the word chemtrails, and then I did some digging and learned that you can spray aluminum and make it not rain. You can also spray other constituents, make it rain. And so my journey began there, where I started going down that rabbit hole and found a couple resources, but nothing that I thought was worthwhile to share with my friends, families, and peers, especially back home in DC. And I learned through the process, first I wanted to just have a conference of all of the speakers in that space. So I had the first global chemtrail summit in Vancouver, Canada in 2016. And then the next year I did Portland. And then the next year I did Tucson, where we had this big showdown with Bill Gates because he was looking to dim the sun publicly in this normalization, launch publicly chemtrails thing, and we stopped Bill Gates from having this big experiment, which was a huge success. But the history of chemtrails, which is, I think the question you asked me, it's been going on since the turn of the century, since 1900. And the movie Frankenskies, it starts in 1920. And it goes through the whole historical chronology of how we got to where we were when the movie was released in 2017. And it's really important for people to understand how much has gone into it. You know, if you first hear about it, it's like, oh, they couldn't do that and they wouldn't do that. But when you see that they've been sharpening their tools for a century to get to where they're at today, and then come the 1960s, flooding the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam, and that was already utilizing the weather warfare that they had, you know, built on. And like I said, sharpen those tools. By the 60s, they already knew how to control weather. And if you can wrap your head around that and then see like, well, if they can, then why don't they talk about putting forest fires out with rain making? And if they can modify hurricanes, why don't they ever talk about steering it away from cities and stuff like that? And then, you know, all these sort of things. But it's been a journey, and waking up to the ongoing aerosol injections in the skies is something that everyone needs to do, but everyone's on their own path. So it's important for us with the knowledge to plant the seeds properly so people can start to wake up. And that was my long-winded explanation of your question. Thank you.
It helps people catch up because it's a fact. It's going on. You know, here I'll give you an example. I called up a couple of years ago in November. It was in November, and I called up state senator, a friend of mine, Neil Anderson, and I said, Neil, I go, you're the perfect guy to sponsor and write a bill banning weather modification, aerosol injection in the state of Illinois. I think that you should do that. And he goes, what the hell are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about, Pat. So I said, okay, do this. And this is for any of the listeners that hear this, this is how you do it. For any loved one who doesn't believe you, anything like that. All you have to do is go to weather modification legislation for federal in Washington, D.C., and then also weather modification legislation for your state. And then look up weather modification companies or corporations, and it's a list longer than my leg that you'll be able to find. And they've got, I mean, Weather Modification Inc., which is here in North Dakota. It's quite a ways away from here, but I'm at a farm in the middle of nowhere. But Fargo is one of the biggest, Weather Modification Inc. is one of the biggest in the world. And they've got planes going all over the place into Canada and all over the United States here. So when they understand that, and then you tell them, now look up the components of what is being sprayed, the aluminum, the barium, and other heavy metals and substances. Then look up, if you would please take the time, instead of calling people insane, take the time and look up what damage aluminum does, for instance, particles of aluminum, barium, and all these other components that you can go through here in a second, what they do to the soil, what they do to root systems, what they overall do to plants, crops, what they do to animals, and what they do to human nervous systems and respiratory systems. And you'll quickly come to the conclusion that this is it's not in any way, shape, or form, once you come away with the investigation, if you're sane at all, that this is for the benefit of mankind in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. And there's some interesting research that I've been doing as of late for my sequel film, Frankenskies 2 Climate Chains, is I'm digging into explaining the chemtrail constituents, which, you know, the powers that be, they, you know, that's a trigger word for a lot of people, but they won't admit that it's already ongoing. They'll say things like, we have a plan to stop global warming, to slow it down by dimming the sun, and we will be possibly using nanoparticulate aluminum oxide to spray in the skies, but they won't admit that they're already doing it because it's you know, crime against humanity. You know, there's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't already have been doing something like this. Plus, it would be jumping the gun, and like, it's not necessarily admitted across the board that there needs to be drastic action on global warming, you know, but they've already started, and I mean, it's in full force now. And if the truth did come out, what would be realized is that this is a classic Hegelian dialectic problem reaction solution, where the solution that they're posing, which they're feeding it through the media and saying, one day we're going to be doing this, you're welcome, and this is something that we have to do. The solution they're posing, which is geoengineering, which is chemtrails, which is spraying the skies with particulates to slow down the heating of the planet, supposedly, this is the actual problem. So the problem is they spray the skies, they make intense weather situations, they exacerbate hurricanes or create hurricanes even, they make drought, they make the forest fires, they make heat waves. Okay, they make heat waves, and then the reaction is fear, which they definitely boost that through the media and whatnot. And then they want people to have no choice and to accept the geoengineering as a solution, which is actually the problem. So the constituents, which activists and people of all walks of life all around the world, they've seen the uptick in these persistent linear cirrus cloud formations, these chemtrails, and different groups around the world have had to do their own due diligence and test the rainwater and whatnot, and test their hair and the soil and all this. And what's amazing is one thing that's showing up in the patents and in the rainwater after they spray heavy, and in the soil, and in people's hair, and in people's blood, and all this is aluminum, right? Or aluminium, depending on where in the world you are. Well, for me at first, this was like, okay, well, maybe it's from, who knows where it's coming from, right? Like how to really pin it on the planes and what have you. Well, recently I've been privy to, and I'm going to have to dive into this in the sequel and explain this, aluminum is not naturally occurring. You have to do so many processes to actually make in the environment, in nature. So in order to make aluminum, it's this long process of mixing chemicals and you mine this certain thing and do all these. You have to go through like 10 different processes to actually create aluminum. And part of it is you smelt the aluminum, and a toxic byproduct of that is fluoride. Fluoride comes off of the aluminum industrial making of aluminum. So then these two things together are like this dual prong attack to get these two things back in your system, where once you get aluminum and fluoride in your brain, it wreaks havoc, and then you end up with Alzheimer's, dementia, all these issues. So I digress. So we have people that have done the research around the world. There's a group in Arizona, a group of 30 activists that came together when the chemtrails really started getting bad in the mid-90s, and they matched the patents of weather engineering with what they were finding in the rainwater analyses after heavy chemtrail spraying, and then the rains, and then test the water. They're testing their hair, testing the soil, and what they found, and everyone around the world as well, is the primary constituents that we're being bombarded with are aluminum, barium, strontium. And it's at this point, it's not like a corollary assumption. It is causal, but at this point, so much data has been gathered over the past few decades of people waking up and trying to figure out what's going on. And so there's different things also. You'll have lithium being sprayed on populaces, or manganese gets sprayed as well. And that's what I think mad cow disease actually is. And that'll make people aggravated and whatnot. And so different things, cadmium and what have you, but the primary constituents, aluminum oxide, barium salts, strontium. And so once you know that, then you can start to do the digging and the research and see what do these things do to the plants, the people, and all that sort of stuff. And aluminum especially, aluminum oxide is a patented fire accelerant. So you got fire accelerants being sprayed on our forests for decades. And then when the forests are super flammable and they go up in smoke, and the headline says, global warming, we've got to dim your sun to stop this. Let's take a step back and see that there's patented fire accelerants being sprayed on this forest, for one. Secondly, the aluminum gets in the soil, and the way that it alkalizes the soil, it creates a microbiome that is not beneficial for the plants, because only certain things can live in the alkaline soil that the aluminum creates. But also it disrupts the aluminum in the root systems and in the trees. It disrupts the tree's ability to uptake water properly. So even if they do get enough rain, they're still drought stricken. And here in Ashland, Oregon, where I live in the west coast of the United States, we have this massive tree die off of Doug firs, ponderosa pines. These sensitive trees are really being impacted, especially this year, by the ongoing geoengineering spraying campaign. And then also when they spray in the skies and they alter the UVs, the UV can shift so much that it's literally looking like it crisps, it like fries the tips of these conifers and pine trees and what have you. So that's all a thing.
Yeah. So, and you know, there's a lot of questions I have in there. You know, the heavy metals, the aluminums, number one, were a favorite of the Nazi scientists experimenting on people in 1930s Weimar Germany. We know that for a fact. They've obviously continued that experimentation en masse out the back end of airplanes, and we've got a big problem because, you know, my business partners and a lot of the people that I run with in circles are agriculture, are soil experts, you know, and we're seeing an uptick, a massive uptick in aluminums and other heavy metals that just simply shouldn't be there. The compost facility in Davenport, Iowa, for instance, the parts per million are 4,100 parts per million aluminum in their compost. Now, that's a dangerous level, to say the least. And I can tell you a firsthand account. One of my friends he works for one of the big ag companies, we'll just say that. And he built an immaculate, amazing garden for his wife. And his wife has serious autoimmune issues. And they decided, well, we're going to build our own garden and we're going to grow our own food and we're going to help her. That's what they were thinking. And she calls me up and she goes, Pat, I ate like half a cucumber out of that garden and I had the worst flare up I've ever had in my life. And I said, well, what did you guys use for soil and what did you use for inputs for fertility in the compost or in the garden, in the soil? And she said, well, we picked up compost from the county facility. Well, that's lawn clippings with massive amounts of, well, NPK fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides and everything else in it, along with now they blend the human waste from the water treatment facility, which has all the pharmaceuticals and everything else in it. And they literally, I went out there and it's, Matt, I can't tell you how beautiful, I couldn't build a better garden if I had $1 million. It's incredible. But they put that compost in that soil and he had to go in and he had to clear out, 20 inches of soil at least and start completely over. And then I told him what inputs we use and got some of our inputs to make sure that the biology is ingesting, because we use extremophiles that have the capability to ingest heavy metals and synthetics. And in the case of synthetics, either way, it's stripping the oxygen, it's restructuring the molecule to be carbon-based, and then synthetics are turned into basically essential fatty acids, and heavy metals are converted into colloid forms of minerals. Those are carbon-based, all can be used for the benefit of the plants and any animal or human that eats them, right? So that sort of solution, we're always talking about solutions as much as possible, but we have to make people understand or allow people to see the problems that we are facing. And look, we could write it off as just complete mental illness, which I think it probably is a lot of that. But a lot of it is, you think about, look, I'm paying you $200,000 to fly a plane. Shut up and fly the plane. And this is what you do, right? There's pilots that are being paid by the gallon, private pilots who are being paid by the gallon to spray these substances out of their planes. And it's a major problem, but nonetheless, it's leading to a lot of issues along with big ag, food production, food processing. And then, of course, when you use a lot of heavy metals and synthetics, you get side effects, because that's what pharma products are. And you get side effects, and you go to a guy in a white lab coat and he writes you a prescription for more synthetic chemicals. And it's just this ridiculous house of insanity that especially Americans are living in right now. And, when I analyze it, it's that people simply don't want to face it, because if they acknowledge that the evil exists that is capable of doing this to mankind, they have to fight it.
That's exactly right. Well, there's a lot there, and then also their ego gets in the way. How could they possibly have been tricked this whole time? But that's what waking up is all about. You realize that there's a battle going on of light and dark, good and evil, and what side are you on? Of course, you're on the side of light, and then you realize that you're on that side, and then you have to get involved. Otherwise, you're compliant. Otherwise, you're giving your consent. It's layered there, but people don't want to wake up, or they have to then realize that their feet are on the battlefield and they have to be involved. I'm curious, how long does it take for the microbes to eat up all that stuff? I guess it depends on how dirty the soil is and all that sort of stuff, huh?
Yeah, so we're doing projects for, for instance, ethanol manufacturing. There was a facility that sold the mash, the seed mash, after they had, got their ethanol production out of it. They sold it as part of a fertility program to farmers in the Midwest. And there were folks, obviously, agronomists or companies that bought train loads of that mash and then sold that to their agronomists. And then their agronomists put it on farm fields or told their farmers to go ahead and put it on their farm fields. And the toxicity, we're in a situation where they're going to potentially condemn millions of acres of land with that. Then we look at biosolids again from human wastewater treatment facilities for all the pharmaceuticals and lawn chemicals and manufacturing chemicals. We're looking at tens of millions of acres in total. But we're doing projects for all of those substances and even oil spills and a lot of other things, uranium contamination in soil from mining. These extremophiles and they love heavy metals and synthetics. They literally love them. And you just have to have an understanding of, what was it, 50 years since the Green Revolution, right? When they said, look at this, I know you guys are in financial trouble. You guys use these chemicals, NPK, petroleum-based fertilizers, and everything else. And you guys can have bumper crops and become millionaires. And the farmers, of course, they're struggling. Say, I'm on board. I'm on board. I'm going to save my family by doing this. And that's how they do these things. They put people in financial dire straits and then introduce systems, right? That's just one of their ways of doing things. So it's been 50 years of dumping billions of gallons per year of these substances on our soil. Now with the aluminum being and the barium and everything else out of the back of airplanes and a lot of other things, destroying the soil. And if we go back to Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 that I was covering on my old podcast, we were covering years ago, and you can elaborate on this, that one of the categories and goals was to remove people from rural lands and move them into cities. And it specifically says that, state and county and city municipal authorities cannot contest when it's time to move those people out of lands that are toxic, water that's toxic, all the other things. We already know, Matt, that the water all around at least the Midwest is full of herbicides, pesticides, and other chemicals and heavy metals. And they're starting to sound the alarm. That Hegelian dialectic that you talk of is create the problem, then the solution, which they're creating, or not the solution, the reaction, which they're creating by not letting it all out. They're scaring the hell out of the populace, telling them everything's toxic, everything's been poisoned, and, oh, by the way, we've got government funds over here, just happen to be a program to purchase your farm and move you off of it, right? And so this stuff's all been put in place for many, many years, and that's really what we're dealing with. But these microbes, these extremophiles, love to ingest those toxic substances and basically convert them to plant food. That's what these things are for. That's what God intended them for.
Amazing and beautiful. And yes, the Agenda 2030, Agenda 20, whatever it is, the new name of it. Also, I think net zero is similar to all of that. Net zero is out of Europe, where they're setting these crazy goals by 2025, 2030, that they want carbon neutral cities, carbon neutral countries, everything's carbon neutral. And under that guise, they're paying people not to have certain livestock, or paying farmers not to plant certain plants, or paying farmers to give up their land. Farmers in Scotland, Ireland, UK are being given £100,000 just not to be farmers. And then a lot of people are being paid to sell their farms over to windmill and solar, all of it just under this whole agenda. Where I live in Northern California, basically Southern Oregon, it's on the West Coast, there's this whole rewilding campaign. Rewild basically means get the humans out. It's Agenda 2030. Rosa Corey, rest in peace, behind the green mask, she's talked about all this. The claim is that there's this need to go green because of global warming or climate change and all that sort of stuff. So, and don't let me get too off topic, but let's just back up. There's been this complete fear-mongering story through Al Gore, Greta, and the powers that be, that sea levels are rising, that ice caps are melting, that the planet is heating up because of our carbon emissions, anthropogenic, man-made global warming. None of this has ever been proven. It's all been exaggerated through media and movies and you name it. I mean, Al Gore's predictions in his film, Inconvenient Truth, none of those things, none of that came true. But people get really caught up in the Hollywood aspect of it and blaming themselves for, they won't say you exhale carbon every couple seconds, right? But they will say that your car emits it and shame on you and all that. If you watch my movie Frankenskies, it starts off in the 1920s, you'll see that the U.S. military industrial complex, when they're learning how to see the clouds and dump all these different constituents into the atmosphere to experiment up there, their primary constituent that they dump is dry ice, which is concentrated carbon dioxide, frozen carbon dioxide. So they won't tell you that they've been dumping carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for a near century, but then they'll turn around, concentrated, and then they'll turn around and tell you it's your problem, it's your fault. Okay, so there's a documentary called Sand Wars. I just watched this one by PBS, and it's completely amazing, showing that there is no sea level rise, that some islands have theft of their sand. There's like sand mafias. Sand is a big commodity, ocean sand, not desert sand. It's used in concrete and building, and Dubai and all sorts of countries really need the sand, and we're running out of it. And so there's these big barges that will go steal sand from islands, and then they'll have increased erosion. And then this increased erosion, they'll get their film crews over there and be like, oh, shame on you for driving your SUV. This island is going underwater, this one particular island. Meanwhile, New York City, coastal California, wherever you want to go to the beach or wherever there's zero sea level, it hasn't risen, it won't rise, it's not going to rise. But they create these situations where you're stuck in fear thinking that you need to do something about it, right? So there's that. So where I live, there's this rewilding, green initiative. This is complete textbook Agenda 2030. So we get forest fires every year because it's a high desert microclimate where the rains are really seasonal. So come October, we get a lot of rain, but this time of year now it's mid-July and we get fires. There's actually a big fire near me right now. And so instead of being 110 degrees today, it'll be 90 degrees and very, very smoky because it's getting crazy here. It's an early fire season, but honestly, the firefighters or the people involved, they'll light these fires. The fires get lit, and then that's for their job security. And then they turn around and say, we need to keep fighting these fires. And the agenda that's unraveling, though, is that there's fire zones that are not safe. So in Northern California, Paradise Fire, that region had 2 fires in a 5-year time frame, and now there's these no rebuild zones. You're not allowed to rebuild on your property there, so they're pushing people out by not letting them rebuild and not giving them fire insurance. There's also a rewilding campaign where I live, where the Army Corps of Engineers came in the 1970s and put in all these dams, hydrological dams, mind you. This is green energy, right? Textbook green energy. So these hydro dams, they create these huge reservoirs, and they regulate with these dams, they regulate the amount of water that comes to the region so that agriculture and farms have water come end of summer so the rivers aren't all dried up, and to regulate it in the spring so there's not floods that wipe out the farms and the people. So the Biden administration has this big push to rewild this region, and they're removing all of the major dams around here, which will make it so that there can't be irrigation certain times of the year, flooding will come back, and all this sort of stuff. These things were put in place in the 1970s that are all being aggressively removed now to rewild this region, which I feel is a big push to eventually say, these regions are too dangerous because of now the flooding and all that, what have you, so we can't have you here. A couple of years ago, we had these very aggressive engineered winds and fires that wiped out the neighboring town that I live in. 2,300 low-income homes went up in smoke in the middle of the day. They turned to dust in the middle of the day. The electricity was left on by the city and the water was turned off. They still haven't explained why, but there seems to be
a duplicate scenario in Hawaii. They did the same thing in Hawaii.
Same exact scenario in Hawaii. Engineered winds, fires lit on the ground, likely by arsons, but they can precipitate lightning with their technology as well. And then when people go to protect their homes, the water is off, but the electricity is left on. And then so as an activist, I wear many hats, and one of my passions is EMF radiation and protection thereof. I have an EMF protective clothing line, and making silver clothing and grounding equipment and even blue light glasses. Check me out at Spero, Spero. It's Latin word for hope, sparrowgear.com. And so being an investigative, wearing all these many hats as I do, being an activist, truth is a frequency, and you honor that frequency of truth, and all these other truths are there on that frequency of truth. So you have to learn all these different things, go down these different rabbit holes, end up wearing all these different hats. I ended up, basically, I'm a weatherman and an electrical engineer and a nutritionalist. And, after I get to know you better, I'll be claiming that I could know a lot more about soil science and stuff like that.
We're gonna learn a lot from each other, I can tell you that. And so a Sparrow Gear, I want to talk about that more because I want to get some of that, and I want to get some for my girlfriend and my kids. I just want to put it in order because it actually worked. I mean, it really actually worked. People have to understand that the EMF soap, and I've talked about this on a previous episode, is so you see people that'll take wood broomsticks or whatever, they'll wrap copper around it and run that down into their garden for electroculture, they call it, right? What people don't understand is that when you have the proper carbon bonded nutrients, forms of metal and other substances that you're supposed to have in your body, that nature provided to all plants, animals, humans, anything on this planet, that you are the antenna for the proper frequencies, right? 7.83 hertz is the Schumann resonance, right, of the earth. That's when you're in harmony with nature, in harmony with the earth. And thus, it's because of the nutrients. I don't go too deep into it with some people who aren't ready to discuss this. I just say, listen, if you put the right forms of these nutrients in the right amounts into your body, it's going to push the bad out and you're going to attain health. Proper mitochondrial function, cellular function, DNA repair, gut health, all these different components, and the nervous system. Our nervous system is very sensitive. And when we're off kilter, then you're getting candidas and parasites and all kinds of other stuff that's going haywire in your body that can exist because they love the garbage you're eating. They love the fact you're toxic, and that's what they feed on. But when you put high-grade carbon-bonded nutrients into your body, all of a sudden they just get out of town. And that's why people will call me after they've taken products and say, dude, there's parasites in the toilet. I say, yeah, that's what we're supposed to. You're an animal. Human beings aren't different from a horse or a cow in the fact that we're just mammals and we get parasites as well. You need to get the parasites out of your body. You need to put the right nutrients in. So back to the electroculture topic, though, is I'm looking at a massive corn crop out here right now, and it's grown with NPK fertilizers. And because of that, they have no immune system, so they have to denature the soil and kill everything. If they were grown correctly with the right homeopathic 90 the 90 essential nutrients with the biology, the microbes that are supposed to be in the soil. They would have the proper immune system where none of that stuff would have to be used, and they would resonate at the 7.83 hertz in line with nature, and they have their own immune system, and bugs won't eat them, and all the other things that go with that. And that truly is the secret. So when you're sticking the copper rod into the ground, that's a very weak attempt at what we're supposed to actually be doing.
I love it. I know of people that have fed their crops ormus, which is very mineral rich, right? And with all these different noble elements that the human body needs, but they feed it to their plants. And a friend of mine had a frost come through, and the plants that had the ormus in tune with the Schumann resonance and up to their highest potential, they weren't impacted by the frost. Right. The plants next to them were, and they were killed. Just to finish the thought that I was saying about wearing all the many hats is in the Maui situation, I realized that it seems like these fires come raging through these neighborhoods and the electricity is left on because there's a surging smart meter effect. These smart meters, they're weaponized. They don't have a surge protection to the main line. And if you're ever in an instance where there's forest fire situation, you're told to evacuate, go kill the power to your house. Go to the power box and eliminate the electricity to your home, and likely your home will be the one that's standing because these are electrical fires that are surging through the homes. And I believe that that's important information for everyone to grasp. Also, you talked earlier about the agenda with the Nazis and how they were experimenting with heavy metals, and here we are today with all these heavy metals and everything like that. This is hard for a lot of people to grasp. It doesn't look like we necessarily won World War II. Sorry to say. So it seems like that they just took this like slower approach, but still we're in a battle for our lives and our children, and it's important to grasp all of this. I love that you keep mentioning NPK. I try to talk about that on a lot of my podcasts. The soil is so depleted, and it only takes NPK to grow foods now. They're not putting in palladium and gold and silver and Einsteinium and all these other elements and nutrients that our body still needs. They're not putting any of that in the soil. All they need is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium to get from grow to bloom to fruit. And why, if you're a farmer and you're worried about the money and you don't know about how to create a healthy environment for, permaculture life kind of thing, then it's easier just to adopt the chemical, lifestyle, which is why it's so important for these extremophiles for that, for you to help these things exist. I think it's very especially the human body too.
And well, that's the thing that I said at the beginning of, when things started going awry in China and they were going, oh, there's COVID, and they were programming everybody with fear, was showing people having convulsions in hospital beds, falling on their faces in sidewalks, showing a giant bat in a bowl of soup, and all this ridiculousness. Matt, I got to be honest with you. I actually laughed. I laughed at the TV when I saw the bat in the bowl of soup, and I said, people can't fall for this. There's no way that people will fall for this. And as soon as the governor of Iowa announced the lockdowns and mask mandates, I went to the big grocery store and I thought, I'm just going to go just to see how people are buying this ridiculousness, not keeping in mind or taking into account that I've been researching this stuff, for over 30 some years after healing my own respiratory issues, childhood respiratory issues on my own with natural, organic, high-grade nutrients and things. So I go to the store, and there's like one other guy out of, I don't know how many people are there. There's a lot of people. And I'm getting screamed at by everybody with masks on. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble because everybody's buying into it. And, even in conversations, people were so brainwashed and hypnotized. That's how they do it, is they induce fear or an emotion. They use fear, though. And then they use someone who you would consider an authority figure like Lester Holt on NBC News, put on your mask and lock yourself in your house and stay 6 feet away and everything else. And it gets seated in the lizard part of the brain like a belief. It's a belief. And there's no amount of data. There's nothing. So I try to use comedy. I actually try to use comedy to deprogram people, or love, the love for their children, and that if I can help them with that emotion of love, by having them envision looking into their beautiful children's eyes and understanding that this is about them. This is not about me, and there's a lot of parents out there who are going to say, if somebody kicked in your front door and they were going to shoot your child, you'd jump in front of them and you'd grab the person with the gun and you'd fight for your life to save your child. Well, educating yourself on what's going on in the world today is literally yourself jumping in front of the gunman to save your children from the things that are coming. Because when we go back to World War II, I believe from my observation that World War II simply served as a tool to a fly swatter came down on Germany where the parasites were, and they just spread out all over the world. We know Operation Paperclip is true. We know that several thousand scientists and intelligence officials from Nazi Germany, rocket scientists like Werner von Braun and others, were brought into our government alone, let alone Argentina and all over the place, in South America and Central America. So they spread out all over the world. Then you have the creation of the UN. You have the creation of NATO, Council on Foreign Relations, on and on and on, the Trilateral Commission. And you look at the generals, the first generals of NATO, they were former Nazi generals. And then they tell you, yeah, but they were the good Nazis, Matt. They were the good Nazis. So, that's how obvious all of this stuff is to those that have been paying attention, right? So that's all it is. And now we've got a global apparatus of parasitic bloodlines that are in the process. They always, wherever they've gone through history, is they've always destroyed the host organism, the nation, and then they've moved on to a new nation. And if we look back at the geopolitical situation, we're looking at a war between us and Russia, the Middle East, Israel, Iran, all these things that are getting ready to blow up. It's a powder keg waiting to go, while China's just sitting by the side. China's definitely taking part, but they're not sending massive amounts of their military personnel or anything like that right now into any war zones. And from my point of view, if Russia and America destroy each other, which is probably going to happen if things don't stop, that China then is the superpower. And we can see the parasites, their parasitic bloodlines, attaching them to China a long time ago, right?
Yes, I love what you said about the fly swatter. That's a perfect analogy, and I'll probably be taking that from you. And thanks. And when you went to the grocery store and you were shocked that only one person was, showing their face, I too went through a similar situation, and I still can't believe that we all went through all of that together. And you're right about how they implanted in the reptilian mind. It's textbook trauma-based mind control. And those without the eyes to see it, to be able to step back and see it through the lens of truth, those people are so subject to it because they don't grasp that it exists, that MK Ultra trauma. And then MK Ultra also through Hollywood and all that stuff came along with the Operation Paperclip. So, they've been perfecting that for quite some time. I like the quote regarding all the people wearing masks or not, showing their faces out and not, and being programmed. Still to this day, even there's people where I go to the grocery store and there's 10% of the people still wearing masks. And you'll see these biker guys, like big macho biker tattooed, guys. And you're just like, come on, man. Like, you're supposed to be a tough guy. Like, get in line with it. There's this quote, people have a choice. You can take authority as truth, or you can take truth as authority. And the choice is ultimately up to you. But honestly, the right path, in my opinion, where I'm at, is you take truth as authority and, leave the rest to God, right? But we're in a very interesting time, and I don't think it's over either. I think that the mind control of the lockdowns was a big test. Likely we'll enter into some other tests, and the World War thing and all of the nonsense out of all of it. We're in a very intense time, and it's important to stay focused, right? Because there's so many different distractions. Whether and I also think, and this is a whole nother topic, and I don't know how much more time we have, but I'll go there. There's the solar flares talk. The media has really been pumping the solar flares talk, and for me, I went to Scotland to speak at this first chemtrail protest, and then I went to the second protest of Scotland for anti-chemtrails, and it was great. I was over there watching their media, and it's being pushed so hard that these solar flares are going to come and likely knock out power. And what is the solution for the world? What can we do about the solar flares? What is the solution? Again, problem, reaction, solution. I think that the best and nefarious and, obviously ugly and evil, the best solution in the mainstream media for solar flare knocking out electricity and whatnot would be chemtrails. It would be, oh, we've got this idea that we were going to use for global warming, but this is the perfect solution. We're going to put aluminum in the sky between us and the solar flares and keep it so you don't lose your Facebook next time. But I do see the writing on the wall there. I believe it's a spiritual battle of sorts. And the more that we all come into light with truth and raise our vibration, they're watching us. They're terrified. We've got all these different aspects of our world. It's a spiritual battle. You name it, from the fluoride to even the clothing that we wear, to the light bulbs, even to the food, to the soil, to the air, to the jabs, all these things. It's important for us as truthers to take a big, big step back. People want to know who, what, why, where, when, how to grasp all these things, because they want to be able to convey the message to their friend, family, and peers. And they're going to be asked all these certain questions. If you don't have all the answers, then you're just a conspiracy nutter. Well, let's take a step back. And one of the first questions is, why? Why, Matt? Why would they do that to us? Why would they attack the food, the water, the soil, the air, all of these things? It's because, seriously, grasp this, they are absolutely terrified of each and every one of us, because we have the potential to vibrate to our highest resonance and to be unfoolable. And then we can't be slaves anymore to their agenda. And as we shine our lights and become our highest potential selves, those around us will see the light and not be fooled anymore as well. And the day that all that wool comes off of the people's eyes is the day that, we win. And they don't want that to happen, because they like their little, control mechanisms and whatever it may be. So please take a step back and realize that we are so powerful that they're pulling out all of the stops, and it won't work at the end of the day, but it's important to grasp it, to see where we're at, and to understand. I mean, take each and every aspect of your life and basically read the ingredients on all of it. It's like when I first got into becoming a better person, I was smoking cigarettes, drinking a lot of alcohol, had horrible heartburn. I was such a not healthy person in my mid-20s. And a family friend said, well, Matt, you can't even sleep at night because you've got acid reflux so bad and all this. Have you ever considered reading the ingredients on the food that you buy? And I was like, what do you mean by that? She's like, you flip it over before you buy it. You flip it over and there's ingredients back there. I had no clue, but that was the first step on my path towards activism, because now I'm reading the ingredients on everything, and I'm doing my due diligence. If it's clothing or a light bulb or anything that I can possibly dig into and see where the possible predatory, attack is, because there is on so many aspects. But then you empower yourself through the knowledge and the education and action. There's a quote, knowledge equals power. It's not that easy of an equation. I think it's knowledge plus action equals power. And that's how I like to live my life as an actual activist.
Yeah, beautifully said. And, that's the thing, and I'll just finish with this, is that all these systems, certainly in America and globally, but, when we say, there's an agriculture system, there's a health system, there's a banking system, monetary system, education system, and we get to everything is a system. And then you have to sit back and ask yourself, well, let's just take the agriculture system, food processing system, and then the medical systems. Well, we're doing this in life expectancy right now. This is the first generation of human beings that will not live longer than their parents. And so you've got to say to yourself, is that for mankind's good, or is it a system designed to harm us? Right? And the people that are in those systems, look, man, I don't blame people. They got to pay their bills. They got to take care of their kids. They're scared. Even if they understand what's happening and they recognize the damage they're doing, they still look at little Johnny and little Sally in their house and go, I got to feed these little guys. I got to take care of them. I got to put a roof over their head. So they have love for their children. That's why they're doing what they're doing. That's that short-sightedness, because they don't see the bigger picture and they don't have the answers. When we actually do have all the answers for all of the problems and all of the systems, and if you can help one person get out of the ag system, or one person get out of the health system, which I've seen thousands over the years get out of the health system, and all of a sudden the skies open up to them and the knowledge rains down and they're not scared anymore. They don't have to go see their doctor every month or every week, or that revolving door of what they've been put through. All of a sudden the fear is lifted, and they have knowledge, and they know that these systems aren't designed for benevolent reasons. And that's a really big deal. That's a wake-up call. So I just urge people to understand that there are answers, and that you should maybe investigate and dig into research a little bit more if nothing else, for the benefit of your children and their health and their future. That's really what this comes down to, is our children. And so, Matt, it's been amazing talking to you, and I appreciate your insights and your knowledge and all the work that you've done on for mankind's benefit. So, again, frankenskies.com, people can go to that. And then also sparrowgear.com, where this clothing works. This clothing works, period, to protect yourself from all of the frequencies, the harmful frequencies that are being, projected all over our planet, but outside of the 7.83 Schumann resonance, right?
Yes, thanks, Pat. And I'd love to let me know what you guys want, and I'd love to send you over some stuff. So don't be shy about that. And then I love what you just said about giving people the answers, because it opens up their mind and their heart and their souls, because people are stuck in this victimhood mentality, right? They're like, oh, I'm a victim. I've got to wear 2 masks because everyone around me is breathing, right? And then if you can basically shake that out of them and show them the light and say, no, you're actually a very powerful spiritual being, and you're under attack for, whatever it takes to snap them out of that, to make them see the light and to see that they are empowered and not just a victim, and all of it is very important. Also, please find me on Facebook, Matt Landman. I've gotten censored on all the other platforms and what have you. The Facebook is still alive and well, and I've got almost 90,000 followers over there, and I try to keep it alive, and it's a nice community on my page. So please, Matt Landman on Facebook. Also, Actual Activists. This has been my baby for a long time, actualactivists.com. This is my website where, when I first got into it, I couldn't find a one-stop shop for truth, where you could go to one resource and find information, and a hub of information on all the different truth topics. GMO, fluoride, geoengineering, and injections, inoculations, all this sort of stuff. So I guarantee anybody, including myself, in yourself, Pat, anybody, you can go to the website and learn something. There's a daily blog on there. There's so much information, especially the 5G section. I've really dumped a lot of resources and documents and studies and whatnot in there. So please check that out. And then also frankenskies@gmail.com. I'm really happy to answer any questions and correspond with anybody who wants to reach out. And I really appreciate you having me on. And I'm working on a sequel, which I hope that you can be interviewed for, frankenskies2.com. Check out for updates over there as well. Thanks.
I love it, Matt. And so it's been a great discussion, and we're going to have to continue this in the very near future as things progress one way or the other. So this is Pat Miletich for Super Soil Superhuman on behalf of my guest, Matt Landman. Thank you very much, Matt, and we'll see you guys all next week. Yeah, I think you still there, Matt?
Yep.
Yeah, they'll edit it. So Dude, thank you very much. That was a great episode.
Yeah, for sure. And please go to the website, make me a list, tell me what you want, email me. Happy to send